First question really is what first got you into Oasis?
Well, it was the music, but also at the time. So I'm just give you background. I'm was born 1980, so I remember hearing this name about this band Oasis when I was like 14. Um, so I wasn't there right from the start, like when the first single came out in sort of spring and then into summer. For me, it was just you were hearing this name and you were sort of getting this idea of, oh, there's these two brothers from Manchester, so it was probably like the stories about them was quite a big deal before you'd even heard any music. It's not like now you can just bang on Spotify and listen to them. It was like, oh, I've read about this band in the NME. Who are they? But you couldn't actually hear them, unless you happen to go out and buy the single
Yeah.
with your pocket money. And so I remember Cigarettes and Alcohol being out and just thinking it was really, really cool. Like, just different from what was around at the time. And like Liam's voice and everything, and it just being like it's just cool. And just speaking to you as a 14-year-old, those lines like, is it worth the aggravation to find yourself a job when there's nothing worth working for? That just really spoke to me. And then by the time we got to like December of '94, that's when Whatever came out as a single. And then by then, I was pretty much that was where they really went pretty mainstream. And yeah, they were by then they were sort of I was full in there, my favorite band.
So would you say that those earlier albums are maybe your favorite, or would it be maybe some of the later ones like the B-sides, compilation with the Master Plan, or maybe sort of like Dig Out Your Soul, Healing Chemistry, things like that?
Yeah, so the way I've always thought about it is, so for me it was like definitely maybe I ended up going back to because I wasn't into them when that album first came out, and a mate of mine in school gave me a tape with definitely maybe on one side and the B-sides on the other side, and so I just absolutely hammered that tape. So then I was really really excited. Then when Morning Glory came out the following autumn in October '95 or September '95, and then Be Here Now. Be Here Now was like the most excited I've ever been for an album. When that came out in August '97, I was just turned 17. Oasis for my life. I was in a band myself as well, and we were just so into Oasis and like just really, really excited about that. And then I was still really into them by the next album, Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, but sort of was waning a little bit. By that time, I'm like 20. I'm sort of getting into other types, different sorts of music. I wasn't as like full on just obsessed. And then into the noughties albums, I was sort of still into it, still listening to them, still enjoying them, but they weren't it wasn't front and center for me. I was like getting into work and getting married, having kids and stuff. And so it's like, oh yeah, oh no, Ace album, great, fine, listen to it a few times, put it away. You know what I mean? And so yeah, and then going back, the way I always say it is I think definitely maybe it's the coolest. Morning Glory is probably the best in terms of like the best collection of songs, but Be Here Now is my favorite. I
Yeah.
think the sound of Be Here Now, what it meant to me when it came out, just the epicness, the nature of it, I love it so much, and that's probably the one I go back to the most.
Yeah, so obviously you touched on a little bit there, like a sort of brief sort of timeline of Oasis. So why do you think they became so big so quickly? Obviously you were around at the time, and
Mm.
obviously I wasn't. So what was it like in the '90s growing up with Oasis, going into the early noughties? Like how big were they and why? Why did they
I
become
mean,
big?
it's ridiculous. Like, it was the biggest thing. I mean, you have to remember it's a different time. I sound like a proper old bastard now. Like, oh, it's a different time. But the changes from '90s to now. Like, I don't think like fashion and things has changed that much, but it's really the technology that's been so massively different. And when you think about the fact that, it was like, well, how could you find out about music? You'd have to watch Top of the Pops on a Friday night. Who's going to be on Top of the Pops was a big deal, or like the chart show on a Saturday morning on Channel 4. There was only these few places where you could see music videos. Like, so a lot of people have like uploaded these compilations of whenever Oasis were on these TV shows, because they were literally like, get the VHS ready, record it, because it was so exciting to see them. But it, like I said earlier, it was that combination of the music was amazing, and it's still, the music still blows people's heads off today. So it's not just like the hype. It was like there was a special music, but then it was the combination of the fashion, the fact they were brothers and would fight and would swear and stuff. That was really appealing. And I know it's sort of, I mean, band swearing and trying being bad and trashing equipment has been cool, because it appeals to teenagers or whatever. But yeah, I mean that was super cool. but then ultimately it was the songs, and when you've got, then by the time, it's only sort of in the space of a year that them from the first album coming out, the Wonderwall just becomes the biggest song in the world. And it was like in the papers all every day. There was Oasis are breaking up, or they've had a fight, or Liam's married Patsy Kensit, and then Noel's. It was always in the paper. Even when they didn't have stuff out, they were constantly like the biggest sort of name. So it's like, if you take your whoever's the Ed Sheeran, Spice Girl, Spice Girl's not Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift, like imagine Kanye, you know what I mean? I suppose Kanye is probably the closest because it's music that's critically acclaimed, but he's also in the press all the time. But and people still hated it. A lot of people did hate Oasis the same way they hate Kanye, but it was then combined with that like working class thing as well. So Southern boys like me could just think, oh, this is like super cool because they're real and they're northern and they're working class. And then whereas if you actually were working class and northern, like they obviously spoke to you in a way that you didn't see that on TV that much. So yeah, it really appealed to everyone.
Yeah, did you get a chance to see Oasis
Yeah, I saw them a few times. The first time I saw them was March '96 in Cardiff, and that one is that was apparently was potentially going to come out as a live album at the time. So there's a really, really good bootleg version of it. If you look it up, Cardiff International Arena, March '96, and it's absolutely brilliant. That was like the last run of gigs before they then sort of changed how they did things for Nebworth and the big summer shows. So Noel's still doing this acoustic set, but they're still doing like a full band set, and then Noel does his acoustic set. And so it was like the last sort of set of gigs in that type before they then changed. Yeah, and that was amazing. I was at Nebworth '96, which is obviously incredible. I saw them twice on the Be Here Now tour in London and in Newcastle. I saw them in Paris, supporting Neil Young in about 99, 2000. And I was at Wembley 2000 as
Wow.
well. So I think that's about 6 or 7.
If you had to pick one out, I mean, obviously you mentioned Nebworth and Wembley there. Those probably stand out to me the most. I mean, you probably can't choose between them. They're both ridiculous.
I mean, yeah, they're all special. I mean, for me, like the Cardiff '96 was my first proper gig as a kid. I was 15, and I'd been to a couple of gigs before, but they were like seated gigs. I'd seen Pulp at Wembley Arena, but it was sitting down and things. And but yeah, to just be in the throng, and Oasis gigs are like insane. Everyone's just not like, like Americans, where they're bashing into each other, and it's like that mosh thing. It wasn't like it's just a jump in football crowd, crush, but it's just everyone together, just wanting to have a great time. And yeah, and it was yeah, that was really special. I generally thought I was going to die a couple of times because it was just too much. And then Nebworth was just more of that incredible experience of being with the 100 odd thousand people in the crowd. Yeah, and then the Wembley one, I wasn't on I don't know if you know that you've got the 2 days at Wembley, one where Liam's like on form, and then one where Liam's hammered and he's just chatting shit the whole time. I was at the one where Liam was pretty much on form. But yeah, that was really special. But no, the two top ones for me are the first two, the '96 and the two '96 ones.
Yeah. So moving forwards now, obviously, we've not seen anything like Oasis for a long time. Maybe we have, but can you see any glimpses of Oasis in any other upcoming bands? Any bands after Oasis? Do you think that people could hold the same style they had and still be successful with that now?
I think it's really, really hard. I think once you've done it that certain way, like, because it needs to be the reason why you can never repeat like the unique thing with something that sounds like that. It needs to be another unique thing. You know what I mean? It's like with like movies or whatever. Movie studios go, oh, I don't know, like this film was like Avengers was really good. Oh, let's do a superhero team up movie. That'll be really good. It's like, no, that was good because it was the first superhero team up movie. So, and do something else that people aren't going to expect. So yeah, I mean, like when Arctic Monkeys came out, that was really exciting. Like, oh wow, who are these kids? And they've got this sound, and his voice is different, and the lyrics are funny. So that was probably the only band since Oasis where you've gone like, wow, who the hell are these guys? You know what I mean? Like, and it's really, and they had their first 2 singles went to #1, and their debut album went to #1. So that was the first one. That's the only one really that's had that same sort of phenomenal rise, but then they didn't then have the breakthrough. So your gran knows it and your mum knows it. Wonderwall, you know, they didn't have the Wonderwall moment. And since then, no, there hasn't, and it's hard to say it will be again. I mean, you still get huge superstars do huge numbers, like, you know, Ed Sheeran and people like that that are just absolutely massive. But in terms of you know, I'm sure if Ed Sheeran wanted to do Nebworth, he could sell 5 nights. You know what I mean? And so you can't say, oh well, there'll never be someone that could do Nebworth again. Well, yeah, Sheeran could do 5 nights easy.
Yeah.
He's absolutely huge. But I think the difference is, are there people out there going to pick up guitars and changing their lives and having a shrine in their rooms to Ed Sheeran? I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah.
if you are, then Christ, can seek professional help. But like, you know, that's the difference. It was that combination of the music is amazing, but it's like you want to be it. You want to go and dress like that, change the way you behave just to be like this band, and no one's done that since. And I can't see that happening again.
Yeah.
I suppose just because you've got with the internet, it's all so fractured. Everyone's got their own look and style and things they can, you know. Back in this sounds super old again. Back in the 90s, you tended to be like you were into hip hop, or you were into swing, or you're into indie, or you're into grunge, right? And if you're into music, you pretty much went down one of those routes. And you might have liked Snoop Dogg or you know, Dr. Dre or whatever, but your thing was your thing. I was an indie kid with the hair and you know, and the swagger and everything. And that was it. You know, that was you sort of pinned your colors to the mast. Whereas I think now it's not that way. I think everyone's into everything all the time. Like, and you can be into Fontaines, you can be into Kanye, you can be into Taylor Swift, you know what I mean? And it's not that big a deal. That just wouldn't have been the case back in the day. It was, you're into indie music, that's it. So I just don't think you're going to have that same band come through that just has that wave of everyone loves them again. It's just doesn't look likely.
Do you think Oasis could be as big now as they were back in the 90s if they were to start again next week? Let's say that, you know, let's say Shake and Make is released next week. Let's say, you know, they've released their brand new, their first ever singles next week. Do you think they could reach the heights they reached nowadays as they did back in the 90s?
No, because it wouldn't get, because you haven't got the same support. I don't see any mavericks out there like Alan McGee anymore. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe there are. I don't know bloody the record labels, A&R companies inside out, but I know that when people come through, like I was hearing, you know, there's a guy, Andrew Cushion, who's from Newcastle, who Noel did a couple of bits with him last year. He produced his single, and he got dropped from his label. I'm talking to his manager about it. It was like, well, you know, Andrew was doing, I don't know, 5,000 streams a month on Spotify, and some guy from Love Island that they'd signed who had no skill at all, no musical talent, but was just doing, you know, doing songs on with a dance producer, was doing like 50,000 streams a month on Spotify. It's like, well, you know what? That's not to say that sort of these special talents aren't going to come through, but it just doesn't feel like if they are going to come through. Like look at Sam Fender. You know, Sam Fender is probably the best example of like a modern act that's got that working class, sings in his regional accent, anthemic songs that everyone loves. He's probably the closest we've got to Oasis now, but it still feels to me like a more manufactured sound. You know what I mean? It feels like a manufactured sound that's directly appealing to the masses. You know, those big oh choruses, it puts me a little bit on edge. I don't think they're genuine. Whereas, you know, with Oasis, they obviously had an eye on, you know, big choruses to get people singing in fields, but it wasn't like there was a record company saying, no, you have to work with this producer, or you have to, like, you know, work with these 3 songwriters. It was just Alan McGee saying, no, you go and do what you want to do. And then they did it, and they did it brilliantly. So yeah, I just can't. I don't think if they came out now, they probably wouldn't even get signed. You know, and as well, they weren't great musicians. You know, it's really unusual that they did get signed, because what they had was a brilliant songwriter and a guy with loads of attitude that could hold a tune. But other than that, the drummer wasn't great, the bass player wasn't great. Bonehead was sort of a balding guy who just chunked out bar chords. They'd never get signed today. You know what I mean? Like it just wouldn't happen. And so it was only because McGee took a chance on them and saw something special, that they did get signed. You know, they did still stick out at the time. You don't sign bands like that look like that. It doesn't happen. But yeah, so it's a one in a million, really.
Yeah. So Oasis as a whole, are they one of the best of all time in terms of music worldwide in this country? Whatever, are they on the levels of sort of like, would you say, and it's a bit of a push, but the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, are they pushing towards that level? And obviously, they're getting more popular nowadays anyway.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the popularity has changed over the years, and I think it's the new generations coming through that has done that. And obviously, Liam coming back and being so successful has made a big impact on that as well. But yeah, when you look at, like, Radio X's top 100 British songs of all time or whatever, and there's like 20 Oasis songs in there, you know what I mean? And there's like 3 David Bowie songs. And now, so when you say who's the greatest or who's the best, like someone like David Bowie or the Beatles, musically, lyrics, the arrangements of the songs, the instrumentation, all of that is better than Oasis. Like, if you're just thinking about analyzing music, no, what they did is better. But what you can't kind of sort of you can't take into account when you try and do that analysis is music just touches people. And Oasis songs have the ability to touch people in a way that you could have the cleverest words, or you could have the most beautiful, perfect arrangement. But if it doesn't move you, either to move you to think about your past, or to think about the future, or to get up and punch the air, then what's the point? And Oasis, that's what they've got more than probably any other band, is the ability to move people. And yeah, and that's what the best Oasis songs do. And so that's why they've stood the test of time. And that's why, like you said, there's out of the 100 top British songs, they'll have 20 of them, because there are some incredible songs that really move people. And we're still fascinated by the characters as well. So yeah, if I was picking, like, who's the best band of all time, I mean, for me it's the Beatles, because I think they've got, they can move people in that way. And then you look at someone like David Bowie, for me is right up there. But yeah, I mean, Oasis, I don't think they are the best band in the world by whatever metric you want to choose. But yeah, in terms of most special, meaning the most to people, yeah, they are right up there.
Can we see a reunion, do you think, in years to come?
Well, I just did a video with James Hargreaves on YouTube, which is about half an hour long, discussing all the ins and outs of it. It's looking more, but to give you a quick answer, it's looking more likely this week than it was last week, because, or a couple of weeks ago, because a big barrier to that has often been seen as the fact that Noel's wife Sarah and Liam really didn't get on very well, and so Liam said some pretty mean things about her and Noel's children over the years, and I think that was a real big barrier between them. So yeah, so apparently Noel is now getting divorced, and so that then sort of would take away one potential step towards a reunion. But personally, I think it's very unlikely. Noel doesn't need it; he's got the money. Liam doesn't need it; he's got the money. Liam would want to do it, but would Noel want to, like, step to the side again? Let his little brother, who's been, take the spotlight again. I don't know if he'd want to do that, but you never know, because it may well be the case that a huge offer comes in and Noel just thinks, "Oh, sod it, let's just do it." So yeah, very unlikely, I'd say, but not impossible.
Yeah. James, also thank you very, very much for your time today. It's
That's
been
okay, mate.
yourself. So yeah, honestly, keep doing the podcast as well. I do really like it. Me and my friends have been getting into massively recently. So thank you very, very much for your time. I can't thank you enough.
No problem at all, mate. All the best. Hope it goes well.